So, it was Christmas the other day, and I hope everybody had a good one. Of course, I know not everybody will have had a good one, seeing as how it was cancelled last minute. December used to be my favourite time of year, because it's the run up to both my birthday and Christmas, so I used to get very excited when December would finally roll around. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but I don't get that excited when December rolls around anymore. I think it's more to do with the fact that because of personal circumstances, December hasn't been a very cheerful time for me for a few years running now. So I wasn't feeling particularly excited or festive about December this year, and I've got a feeling that that excitement for December might be dead for me altogether. Also, I don't know if anyone else is feeling the same thing, but because of the lockdowns and the amount of time we've all wasted this year, especially the wasted summer, my body clock isn't properly aligned with what time of year it is. It doesn't feel right to me at all that in 5 days, 2020 will be over. I feel like my body clock is still trapped in autumn at the moment. I've got a few theories as to why the government cancelled Christmas. I think the official claim is that they did it because of the new strain of COVID, but I don't believe that for a second, seeing as how they've been aware of this new strain since September. Seems remarkably coincidental that it would reach breaking point just a few days before Christmas. Up until this point, the government had been telling people that Christmas would be allowed no matter what, but they were also advising that people shouldn't do the things which they were allowed to do. I've been listening to James O'Brien as ever, and he couldn't stop slamming the government for this mixed messaging, but I actually think this is probably the most sensible thing the government has said all year. They were handing responsibility to individual families. They were basically saying, do what you want, but we advise you not to do it, which is, I think, the correct response to this pandemic. Too bad they U-turned on it, and I have to wonder how much of that U-turn was down to the media hounding them, and by the disgraced scientist Neil Ferguson saying things like, oh, some people will die because of getting infected on that day, meaning Christmas Day. Presumably him shagging that married woman at the height of the first lockdown didn't cause anyone to die. But this is why I can't take the government guidance seriously. Not just because they've got a hypocrite informing them and telling everyone else how to live their lives, but because you just don't know who has a vested interest in prolonging the lockdown or cancelling Christmas. I'm going to indulge in conspiracy speculation here for a moment. Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, has done very well out of this pandemic. It wouldn't surprise me if it turned out that Professor Lockdown is on the payroll of Bezos to promote as much hysteria as possible in order to prolong the lockdown for as long as possible, which would of course mean more people buying shit they don't need off Amazon. That would certainly explain why Neil Ferguson is such a fucking repulsive hypocrite. Or it could be a case of the government wanting to look like they can take tough decisions, or that they must cancel religious festivals equally, or because they're caving in to the pressure put on them by the media, or any number of reasons which may have nothing to do with the actual transmission of the virus. So that's why I do whatever I want to do, based on my own personal evaluation of what's going on. I don't need men in white coats to tell me not to have Christmas with my family. If people were dropping down dead on the street, I'd probably decide on my own not to see my family. Or perhaps if I knew one single person that had died from COVID, I maybe would find the virus more scary than I do and decide not to see my family. But seeing as how I don't know anyone that's died, and I think I only know 2 people who have had confirmed COVID, and I use the word confirmed very loosely because of false positive tests, I don't find it to be much of a threat to myself or my family. And call me selfish, but if you think that I'm going to not see my family on Christmas Day, particularly after 2 or 3 ruined Christmases in a row, you've got another thing coming. But anyway, what I really wanted to talk about was this meme right here, which was doing the rounds on social media in late October. It says, if we are in lockdown for Christmas, remember this is not, in big capital letters, the government's fault. It's the public's fault. This is your 9-week warning. Wear a mask, wash your hands, follow the guidelines, stop spreading the virus. Don't ruin it for everyone else. This really upset me at the time for a number of different reasons, which I'm going to explain to you now. First of all, it's blaming the public, which I never like. The government have opted to take charge of this virus, and so have accepted that responsibility. You can't then turn around and blame the public, even if it's because the public have chosen to ignore the government advice, because that means that the government advice isn't fit for purpose. The government have tried since the beginning of the year to basically outlaw human behaviour and legislate against human nature. The failure to integrate human nature with their advice and rules is one of the reasons it gets so widely ignored. That's not a failure of the people, that's a failure of the government. Second, it's so battered wife syndrome. The way I see it, the government has come up to us and said, we're going to take away your civil liberties unless you do exactly what we say. And when people don't do exactly what they say, you blame the people. That's victim blaming. The government is using our civil liberties to extort us, and you're blaming the extortee for not going along with it. And the extortee is, of course, yourself and your neighbours. Classic Stockholm Syndrome. Third, it completely lets the government off the hook for all of their failings throughout this pandemic, which has got us to the point we're at now. And here's a quick reminder of what those failings are, because I know some people's memories are very short when it comes to this pandemic. They allowed mass gatherings like Cheltenham to go ahead. They left the borders open with no checks at any airports. We were one of the only countries in the entire world to not put any measures in place whatsoever on people coming into the country early on. And to my knowledge, the border hasn't been shut for people coming in for even a single second in 2020. They had a PPE shortage, and then there was that mess with buying PPE that was unfit for purpose. They sent COVID patients from hospital back into care homes, which killed many vulnerable residents and probably staff too. They then used that death statistic, which they are in part to blame for, to justify taking away your freedoms. They undermined public confidence with the Dominic Cummings scandal by all defending his rule breaking. Although for me, that wasn't what did it. It was their failure to tackle or properly condemn the BLM protests that pushed me over the edge personally. They fucked up the world-beating test and trace system after spending billions on it. They have given confusing messaging throughout the whole thing. They introduced an unenforceable tier system, which makes people more inclined to skip over to the nearest lower tier area and spread the virus around there a bit. And by banning Christmas at a moment's notice, they caused thousands of people to evacuate London, many of whom would have taken this new strain with them. No doubt in about a week, when infections spike again thanks to their actions, they will use that statistic as evidence why they then need to introduce Tier 5, where breathing in a public place is now illegal. And you wonder why I don't take the government to be a credible authority? You'd be forgiven for thinking that they're actually trying to spread the virus around on purpose and break the country, and then blame the people for it. This, by the way, is why I've got a lot of time for conspiracy theorists at the moment. And anyone who blames the public instead of blaming the government is just doing the government's work for them. I've been saying to my friends for months now that Christmas would break the lockdown spell that has been cast on the public, but I'm starting to think I was wrong. I've had conversations with people who have cancelled Christmas because the government told them to. Never mind the fact that the government have cocked pretty much everything up thus far. I don't know how much incompetence and negligence it would take to break the spell that's been cast on the public, where they just blindly follow the rules because the authorities told them to. I honestly thought that people would do whatever they wanted to do this Christmas, which is why I thought the government didn't try to legislate against Christmas, because it would have shattered their authority into a million pieces and may well have disproved the COVID hysteria. But then along came this new strain, even though it's been here since September and apparently is no more deadly, and that set the COVID panic back into full swing. And to come back to this meme, during the 2019 election, the government had a meme team that works for them and produced pro-Tory memes. I don't know whether they're still working for them now or not, but if they are, it's very possible that this meme is actually official government propaganda. And the people that shared it are letting the government off the hook for all of their incompetence and negligence, meanwhile blaming ordinary people for simply living their lives and doing what people do. I had a great Christmas with my family this year, specifically because I ignored government advice. If me and my family get sick, so be it. We all know the risks and we all accepted them by being in the same room together. So to anyone who sacrificed their plans on the 9 weeks up to Christmas, as this meme instructs, I have to ask, do you feel like a mug now? Because I know I would. And I wonder how many times the British public has to be mugged off before they can wake up and smell the bullshit.